They say training camp is where battles are won, but for Shadore Sanders, the fight began long before the cleats hit the grass. While other rookies were stretching out the final days of their freedom, Shadore was out there on a private field, decked in full Browns gear, helmet buckled, shoulder pads snug, jersey pulled tight over his chest, throwing darts like it was week one. Not for show, not for likes, for legacy. This wasn't some flashy Instagram stunt or marketing reel. This was serious, intentional, the kind of quiet work that most players keep private, but when revealed stops the football world in its tracks. Because let's be clear, no rookie does that unless he already sees himself as the starter. Shaw wasn't just throwing routes in July heat, he was visualizing his role. He was seeing himself in that huddle commanding respect, moving the chains, and he was doing it when the lights were off and the league was asleep. But here's the kicker. Some folks still don't want to give him credit. They ignore the work. They downplay the discipline. They'll tell you he's not ready, like they've already made up their minds. Maybe it's because he's Deion's son. Maybe it's because he doesn't fit the mold they're used to. Or maybe, just maybe, they're scared he might actually be better than the ones they've been hyping for months. Either way, the countdown has begun. And the footage, it doesn't lie. Shadore Sanders isn't just coming, he's already here. There are moments that say more than words ever could. And when footage surfaced of Shadore Sanders throwing passes in full Cleveland Browns gear, helmet, jersey, pads, the whole package, you could feel the message in every frame. This wasn't just a workout, it was a statement. While most rookies were often during their last days of summer, Shadore was locked in, drenched in sweat on a private field at his father Deion's house. He wasn't just working on his footwork or mechanics, he was visualizing himself as QB1. Now, let's be honest. How many first-year quarterbacks put on the full uniform and simulate live reps before even reporting to training camp? That's rare. That's mental preparation at an elite level. That's what the greats do when the cameras aren't rolling. And yet somehow you won't see this on ESPN's front page. You won't hear scouts praising the discipline it takes to train in full uniform weeks before the first team meeting. Why? Because it doesn't fit their preferred narrative. For those who want to paint Shadore as just some pampered legacy kid riding his father's name into the NFL, this clip makes things uncomfortable. It ruins their easy storyline because here's a 22-year-old man working while the rest of the league is resting, not on vacation, not on a yacht. When you walk into the Cleveland Browns quarterback room this year, you're not just seeing four arms competing for a job. You're stepping into one of the most political depth charts in football. Joe Flacco, the grizzled Super Bowl MVP. Kenny Pickett, the hometown project tossed aside by the Steelers. Dylan Gabriel, the college system guy with the right PR buzz. And then there's Shadore Sanders, the lightning rod, the one nobody in the establishment wants to deal with because his presence alone exposes the cracks in their process. From the outside, you'll hear it framed neatly. Shadore is a rookie, he has to wait his turn. But dig deeper and you'll see the truth. Reps are currency in the NFL. They dictate opportunity, they shape perception. And before a single preseason game is played, the insiders already say the early reps will go to Pickett and Flacco. It's a familiar playbook. Lock the vets into the top of the rotation before the pads even come on. Control the storyline before reality can interfere. But that's where Shadore disrupts the plan. He's not just another fourth-string camp arm. He's a quarterback who studied under pressure, led comeback drives in front of hostile crowds, and made throws most NFL prospects can't even attempt. He's also the only one out of the four who's visibly gone above and beyond this offseason, suiting up in full gear and drilling like he's on the active roster. Nobody handed him a PR team. Nobody gifted him first-team reps. All he did was grind. The uncomfortable truth. If Shadore's name was anything other than Sanders, and if he played the media game a little more safe, we might already be calling him a sleeper of camp. But when you carry the weight of legacy and expectation, and when you outwork everyone else, politics tend to follow. In this battle, it's just getting started. In every NFL training camp, there's a dance behind the curtain, a rotation that coaches and coordinators choreograph with precision. Who gets reps when and which unit? That order doesn't just determine development, it reveals how the team really feels about you. And right now, all eyes are on whether Shadore Sanders will crack that rotation and force his way into the Browns quarterback conversation. He was drafted dead last on the Browns depth chart, treated like a sideshow, ignored, overlooked, and forced away his turn behind quarterbacks who couldn't hold a candle to his talent. But now, Shadore Sanders is finally getting the stage he was born to own. And it's about to go down this Friday night under the lights in Charlotte. The Cleveland Browns have just made the most unexpected, controversial, and maybe explosive decision of the entire preseason. Shadore Sanders will be starting against the Carolina Panthers in the team's preseason opener this Friday. And it's not just symbolic. This is the moment fans have been waiting for since draft night. The moment Shadore was pushed aside in favor of a dusty Joe Flacco, an overhyped Kenny Pickett, and an undersized Dylan Gabriel. Now all of them are out, hurt, resting, benched, and the last man standing is Shadore Sanders. But don't think for a second this was the Browns' plan. This isn't strategy, it's desperation. They never wanted to give Shadore his chance, but injuries forced their hand. Now in front of a national audience, Shadore has a chance to torch the Panthers' defense and expose the Browns for anything they've tried to hide. Because once he shines, there's no going back. And the franchise that buried him might just find themselves kneeling to a new QB1. Let's keep it real. This was never the plan. The Cleveland Browns didn't draft Shadore Sanders to start. They didn't even draft him to compete. They drafted him to shut people up, to keep the media circus quiet after the owner got caught backpedaling, publicly distancing himself from the pick, claiming he didn't even want Shadore. That alone should have told us everything. This organization never saw him as a real threat to take the starting job. They saw him as a placeholder, a marketing piece, a bench warmer with famous DNA. That's why they buried him at QB4. Behind Kenny Pickett, whose hamstrings are made of rubber bands. Behind Dylan Gabriel, a 5'11" college hero who couldn't hit a slant if the defense is laid down. Behind Joe Flacco, who's closer to calling games than playing in them. And now that the two of them are sidelined and the other is too old to risk, it's Shadore's turn. But not because the Browns wanted it, because they had no choice. This is what happens when you ignore talent. When you let politics, prejudice, and pride get in the way of football. Shadore Sanders should have been getting first-team reps from day one. Instead, he was out there mimicking the opposing QB on scout team duty, running plays against the ones with backup linemen and no protection. And still, he made noise. Now, with the Panthers game looming, the Browns are about to find out what happens when the guy you tried to silence finally gets a mic. And what happens next might flip the entire quarterback room upside down. This Friday isn't your typical preseason opener. For Shadore Sanders, it's a careering audition. One that was never supposed to happen, but here we are. The Panthers are lining up across from him. The lights will be on. The pressure is real. And Shadore, he's walking into Bank of America Stadium with the entire NFL watching. Let's be clear, this isn't just about throwing passes. It's about proving the Browns wrong. They spent an entire offseason trying to keep him off the field. They gave reps to quarterbacks that couldn't move the ball. They ignored Shadore's accuracy in camp. They downplayed his leadership. They acted like his 74% completion rate in college was a fluke, like his rise from Jackson State to Colorado to the NFL was just hype. Now they're out of excuses. This game is Shadore's moment of truth. Not only will he be facing an NFL defense, but he'll be doing it with the weight of doubt on his shoulders and fire in his chest. And if he cooks the way he did in college, if he carves up the Panthers with poise and precision, then every lie, every limitation they placed on him crumbles in front of the world. And here's the twist. He's not doing this with first team. He's doing it without chemistry, without weapons, without the reps he deserves. So, imagine the statement it makes if he dominates anyway. Because if Shadore lights it up on a Friday, the Browns won't just have a quarterback controversy, they'll have a quarterback uprising. Let's stop pretending this is even close. The Browns' depth chart reads like a cruel joke. Joe Flacco at the top, followed by Kenny Pickett, Dylan Gabriel, and then buried at fourth, Shadore Sanders, and not to mention the recent signing of Snoop Huntley. But if we're talking about actual talent, if we're talking about who can move the football, extend plays, read defenses, and win games, then Shadore isn't just better than the other three. He's the only one worth building around. Start with Flacco. He's 40. He's slower than dial-up internet and still living off a Super Bowl ring from over a decade ago. The Browns putting him atop the depth chart isn't strategy, it's nostalgia.